has finally got back to where it was before the banks hit the wall and the economy slumped into recession. A small rise of just 0.8% in the last 3 months marked the historic moment. But there was caution from both the Chancellor and Labour.
With factories still not making as much as they were and construction firms not as busy, Mr Osborne said there is still much to do. Labour said there was still little sign of a feel-good factor amongst working people. And as our business editor Joel Hills reports from Newcastle, prosperity still remains some distance away.
The recovery continues to spark. Our economy has now recovered all of the ground lost in the Great Recession. This company hasn't. They employ 200 fewer staff, but the orders are coming in and they're recruiting. Confidence is back.
We see continued growth over the next 2 or 3 years. Our business is inevitably cyclical, and we see this as being an upturn now that is sustainable.
You remember the queues. Newcastle is where the first tremors of the financial crisis were felt. Northern Rock has since become Virgin Money. The Chancellor was in town today to mark the moment we got back to where we were. The economy has returned to the size it was before the recession began in 2008. Between April and June of this year, it grew by 0.8%. But while the economy is the size it was, the population is bigger, growing from 61 million to 64 million in the latest count. So on an individual level, we're still not as wealthy as we were.
I'm the first to say as well that when you have a Great Recession, when you have the economic trauma that Britain went through 6 or 7 years ago, it has an impact on people's living standards and prosperity.
What's the message to the British people? When will they start to feel that prosperity has truly returned?
I think people see economic prosperity returning, they see economic security returning, but they know that the job is not complete.
Northern Rock, a bank that went bust, is today in visibly much better shape. And by coming here today, the Chancellor is sort of inviting us to believe that the British economy is similarly transformed. And it's true, we have had strong growth for some time now, but it doesn't necessarily follow that this recovery is sustainable. Joel Hills, ITV News in Newcastle upon Tyne.
Well, over to our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan, who's in Westminster for us. So, Carl, how have these figures been received by the main parties?
Well, the Conservatives, of course, are absolutely delighted, although, as you heard in Joel's report, they are still being a little bit cautious. The Lib Dems are going round reminding everybody that they're part of this too, saying that without them there'd be no coalition, without the coalition there'd be no recovery. It puts Labour in a bit of a tricky spot, this kind of economic good news, and they are still focusing very much on the cost of living.
But the fact is that for families here across the country, times are still very hard. Living standards are still going down. For most people, there's no recovery to speak of, and I don't think they want complacency or more of the same from the Conservatives. They want real change.
And there's evidence to suggest that he has a point. Comres carried out this poll for ITV News. They asked people whether they agreed or disagreed with the following statement: despite the economy growing, I don't feel better off. 69% of people agreed with that. 19 disagree, 13 don't know. And that's the reason the Conservatives are sounding the note of caution. They know that economic figures on their own aren't enough. Voters need to be feeling the warmth in their wallets before the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats can expect to feel the warmth at the ballot box next year.
Carl Dinnan in Westminster, many thanks.
Israeli and Hamas forces each launched new strikes